Welcome to British Focus, where we expose political doublespeak and hold leaders accountable. Today, we unravel Keir Starmer's latest performance, interview, where he once again masters the art of saying everything and nothing at the same time. From dodging straight answers to his favourite catchphrase, fully funded, fully costed, we break down the contradictions and empty rhetoric. If you're tired of political illusions, like, share, and subscribe. Let's get to the truth behind the spin.
Change and me as leader go together. It was my mission to change this Labour Party.
If I may, Sir Keir, you are already going backwards. And what people want more and more is a very clear picture that could...
...by a legal route. So they come here illegally. Will they be processed?
Yes.
How?
Well, through the system that's been in place for years and years and years.
And so they've come here illegally, they're processed, and then what?
For years, the system in this country has operated on the basis that if someone claims asylum, they are processed.
If someone arrives here illegally, they will be treated exactly the same as someone who comes here legally. They will be processed. So wherein lies the deterrent?
For the institutions of the
year or
economy.
two of Parliament, if you get in, growth will not double.
Keir Starmer's remarks in this interview expose a glaring lack of clarity and conviction, particularly on immigration policy. He repeatedly asserts that illegal migrants will be processed in the same manner as legal arrivals, which effectively undermines any deterrent to illegal crossings. The absence of a firm stance or any concrete measures to prevent abuse of the asylum system suggests either incompetence or deliberate obfuscation. His vague language, stating that migrants will be processed but failing to outline the consequences, reveals an alarming disconnect between rhetoric and reality. Furthermore, Starmer's defensive stance when questioned indicates a leader struggling to maintain credibility. He speaks of change, yet fails to articulate any substantive policy shifts. His evasive answers reinforce the perception that Labour lacks a coherent strategy on migration, instead offering empty platitudes that fail to reassure the public or address the pressing issues of border control and national security.
Done better. Because there's clearly been success in continuity of the lead you've held, but you must constantly ask yourself, could I have done something better? And is there anything so far that you think you could have done better?
I think there are always things in any operation.
Give me some examples.
But, I mean, we are...
Keir Starmer's response in this segment exemplifies his inability to take accountability or offer concrete policy reflections. When asked if he could have done anything better, he gives a non-committal response, resorting to vague platitudes instead of genuine self-criticism. His refusal to provide specific examples suggests either a lack of introspection or an unwillingness to acknowledge past failures. This is particularly concerning for a leader who seeks to convince the public that Labour is ready to govern. Instead of demonstrating leadership by identifying areas for improvement, Starmer dodges the question, reinforcing the perception that he is risk-averse and more focused on avoiding scrutiny than engaging in honest political discourse. His vague rhetoric further fuels doubts about his ability to lead decisively. If he cannot admit past mistakes or articulate a clear vision for improvement, how can voters trust him to navigate the complex challenges facing the UK? His hesitance only weakens Labour's credibility.
It's very important to make the argument that if you want change, you have to vote for it. This is a big choice election because it's either 5 more years of what we've just had for 14 years, because nothing's going to change. That means the NHS won't get better. We'll still be in a sort of low-growth, high-tax doom loop. Or we can choose a different path and start to rebuild the country with Labour.
Keir Starmer's statements in this section are filled with grandiose rhetoric but devoid of substance. He urges voters to embrace change, yet fails to define what that change entails beyond vague promises. His claim that the NHS won't improve under the Conservatives ignores Labour's own failures in devolved healthcare systems, such as in Wales, where waiting times are at record highs. Moreover, his assertion that Labour will rebuild the country lacks credibility, as he provides no tangible economic plan beyond blaming the Tories. His portrayal of the UK as trapped in a doom loop is alarmist, yet he offers no concrete solutions to escape it. The absence of policy specifics suggests he is more interested in emotional appeals than serious governance. Starmer's approach reduces the election to a simplistic us versus them narrative, assuming that discontent with the status quo is enough to secure votes, rather than presenting a viable, detailed alternative to restore economic growth and public services.
consistently through the campaign about you personally is about your performance. And those persistent questions you must be aware of, that people still, despite the number of debates we've had, despite the number of times you've sat here with us on the sofa, still don't feel like they know the full picture from you, Keir Starmer, about what it will be like with you as Prime Minister. That has been ongoing throughout the campaign. You must have heard those comments. Do you think that's valid?
Keir Starmer's inability to establish a clear and relatable leadership identity is glaringly exposed in this segment. The fact that, despite numerous debates and media appearances, voters still feel they don't know him highlights a critical flaw in his leadership. He lacks authenticity and conviction. This persistent perception problem suggests he is either too scripted or too evasive, leaving the public unsure of what he truly stands for. Instead of seizing the opportunity to define his vision, Starmer remains passive, allowing doubts about his leadership to fester. His cautious, lawyerly approach to politics, where he avoids firm commitments and prioritizes ambiguity, only reinforces concerns that he lacks the decisiveness needed to be Prime Minister. A leader must inspire confidence, yet Starmer's failure to connect with voters on a personal level raises serious doubts about his ability to lead a nation in crisis. If he cannot clearly articulate his own identity and purpose, how can he expect the electorate to trust him with the country's future?
The way I'm taking this is that you may well be the Prime Minister who says, well, I did say that then, and it was fully costed then, but here I am now and I'm telling you something else. And people want an assurance that's not what you are going to do.
Let me give that assurance, because our manifesto is a manifesto for growth, for growing our economy and making sure that people are better off across the country. So that means tough decisions. So in our manifesto, you've got tough decisions on planning, on infrastructure.
Keir Starmer's attempt to reassure voters in this segment only reinforces doubts about his consistency and reliability. His defensive tone suggests he is aware of his reputation for shifting positions but lacks a convincing rebuttal. While he insists Labour's plans are fully costed, he provides no evidence or specifics to back up his claims. This fuels skepticism that, if elected, he may backtrack on key promises, much like he did with his leadership pledges. His vague reference to tough decisions on planning and infrastructure lacks the clarity needed to inspire confidence. If these decisions are so crucial, why not outline them in detail? Instead, Starmer relies on empty reassurances, as if repeating the phrase fully costed will be enough to silence critics. His reluctance to engage with the real concerns of voters, such as how Labour will fund its plans without raising taxes or increasing borrowing, only reinforces the perception that his leadership is built on political expediency rather than principled governance.
We changed the Labour Party, and the Labour Party we put before the country is a changed Labour Party. We campaign as changed Labour, and we will govern as changed Labour. And that change and me as leader go together. It was my mission to change this Labour Party.
If I may, Sir Keir, well, you are already going backwards. And what people want more and more is a very clear picture that could be about tax. And I know you've got a list of taxes you say you won't do. There is still a strong belief from most people that something doesn't add up.
Keir Starmer's repeated insistence that Labour has changed rings hollow when he fails to explain how. His reliance on vague rhetoric rather than tangible evidence suggests that this so-called transformation is more about political branding than substantive reform. If Labour has truly changed, why does he struggle to provide a clear policy direction? His attempt to distance himself from past Labour failures is undermined by his own inconsistencies, having previously backed policies he later abandoned. His comments on tax only deepen skepticism. While he reassures voters that certain taxes won't rise, he fails to address the lingering doubts about how Labour will fund its spending plans. The phrase, "something doesn't add up," is particularly telling, as it encapsulates the very problem with Starmer's leadership. His numbers don't add up, his promises lack credibility, and his constant repositioning leaves the electorate questioning whether he stands for anything at all. Change without clarity is meaningless, and Starmer offers neither.
You'll sit on the sofa here and you'll say, now, I said that then, the reality is this. How can you reassure people that's not who you're going to be?
Let me take that again head on, because if we learned one thing in the last 2 or 3 years, it was when Liz Truss made unfunded commitments, in her case to tax cuts.
Keir Starmer's attempt to distance himself from political flip-flopping is as unconvincing as it is predictable. By referencing Liz Truss's disastrous tenure, he tries to deflect scrutiny from his own inconsistencies rather than addressing the concerns directly. The reality is that Starmer has a well-documented history of shifting positions, whether on Brexit, public spending, or key Labour policies, which makes his reassurances ring hollow. His vague promise to take this head-on is meaningless when he immediately pivots to attacking the Conservatives instead of providing a clear, principled response. If he truly wanted to build trust, he would outline concrete commitments and stick to them, rather than resorting to deflection. His reliance on comparing himself to Truss is a weak strategy. Simply not being her does not make him a strong leader. Starmer's failure to provide a genuine answer to the question only reinforces doubts about his credibility and raises the likelihood that he will, in fact, betray his own promises once in power.
Those measures are the crucial measures for economic growth, and I have full confidence in them because for years now we have been talking to our partners, the businesses that will come up alongside us to deliver. We've identified together the barriers to growth and we intend to take those barriers down. And that is the way forward for this country, which is not to accept the defeatism that says we can't be any better than we've been in the last 14 years.
Keir Starmer's economic promises in this section are riddled with ambiguity and hollow optimism. He speaks of crucial measures for economic growth, but fails to articulate what they are beyond generic references to business partnerships. His insistence that Labour has identified barriers to growth is meaningless without a clear strategy to remove them. This lack of specifics raises doubts about whether he actually has a viable plan or is merely posturing for electoral gain. Furthermore, his dismissal of defeatism ignores the fact that Labour itself has often adopted a tax and spend approach that discourages enterprise and economic dynamism. His speech is filled with feel-good platitudes, yet voters are left questioning how he intends to deliver on these grand promises without increasing taxes or government debt. Simply declaring that Labour will drive growth does not make it true. He needs to prove it with detailed policies, something he continues to evade at every opportunity.
Paying the price, particularly in their mortgages. Now, the lesson to take from that is that economic stability, fiscal rules, and making sure that every single thing is fully costed and fully funded is a foundation, not just going into an election, but the outside of the election when you build and stabilise the economy, which will be our number one objective. And that is why our manifesto, which is a manifesto for growth, for wealth creation, is founded on this principle that every single thing in it, every plan, is fully costed and fully...
Keir Starmer's insistence on economic stability and fully costed policies is an exercise in superficial reassurance rather than genuine transparency. He claims Labour's plans are financially sound, yet consistently avoids specifying how they will be funded. The phrase fully costed is meaningless without the fine print, and Starmer's track record of shifting positions suggests that voters have every reason to doubt his promises. His attempt to project fiscal responsibility is further undermined by Labour's historical tendency to expand public spending without sustainable funding mechanisms. If his economic approach is as solid as he claims, why does he refuse to answer direct questions about taxation and borrowing? His speech is designed to soothe concerns without actually addressing them, relying on carefully crafted rhetoric rather than substantive policy. Without concrete commitments, his words remain empty, and his economic credibility remains as fragile as ever.
Time and time again, and I dare you to not say it over the next 7 minutes that we have you. Fully funded, fully costed, right?
Why shouldn't we say that? Because it's so
I'll tell you why.
fundamental.
Because fundamentally, what's happening is institutes like the Institute for Fiscal Studies come out and say there is a conspiracy of silence, leaving voters guessing and casting ballots in a knowledge vacuum. And they've spoken about a trilemma, basically saying, whether you say it's fully funded and fully costed, there are facts that with the spending that needs to be done, despite you saying we can pay for it by this, pay for it by that, to pay for everything, you will either have to borrow more, taxes will have to go up, or public services will have to be...
Keir Starmer's defensive stance in this section highlights his inability to address the fundamental concerns surrounding Labour's economic credibility. Rather than providing a clear response, he doubles down on his well-worn mantra of fully funded, fully costed policies, phrases that have become little more than political slogans. His frustration at being challenged on financial transparency is telling, as it exposes the fragile foundation of his economic claims. The reference to a conspiracy of silence is ironic given Starmer's own reluctance to answer direct questions about taxation, borrowing, and public spending cuts. The economic reality is simple. If Labour plans to expand government spending, the money must come from somewhere. Yet, instead of acknowledging this unavoidable truth, Starmer tries to sidestep accountability. His evasion only reinforces suspicions that his economic promises are unrealistic, designed more to pacify voters than to offer genuine fiscal responsibility.
I said it is, and I did it.
Well, it's very different to managing the economy, isn't it?
We will pick up the country in a broken state, put it back on its feet, and rebuild it so that we can take it forward and people can genuinely say, I am better off, myself, my family, my community.
Starmer's closing remarks are as vague as they are idealistic. His claim that Labour will pick up the country in a broken state and rebuild it is an empty promise unless he explains how. The notion that people will genuinely say they are better off under Labour is pure speculation, unsupported by any detailed policy framework. His refusal to engage with economic realities, such as how his government would finance public services without excessive taxation or borrowing, renders his rhetoric meaningless. Repeating ambitious goals without offering a roadmap is not leadership, it's political posturing. Moreover, his assertion that he did it is particularly misleading. What exactly has he done? Labour is not yet in government, and Starmer has no track record of implementing national economic policies. This final appeal is emblematic of his entire approach. Grand declarations designed to inspire confidence but devoid of the substance needed to earn it. That's all for today on British Focus, where we cut through the political smokescreen and expose the truth behind the rhetoric. Keir Starmer may think vague promises and rehearsed slogans will win over the public, but we're not buying it. If you enjoyed this breakdown, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Join the discussion in the comments. Do you trust Starmer's vision, or is it just more of the same political spin? Stay sharp, stay informed, and we'll see you in the next one.